I just first off want to start off by saying learning how to create your own reality is something that cannot be accomplished just because you hope or want it to happen. And I know that there is a lot of information out there about how to do this, and it can be really frustrating because you are probably looking at aspects of your life, seeing things that you want to change, but it don't seem like it's changing. It seems like the more you do, the more you feel stuck or trapped in whatever it is that you're perceiving. If I'm not speaking to you, then you can skip this. You don't need this. But if I'm speaking to you and this is resonating with you, I feel like this is something that is happening to a whole lot of us. Okay? And I want to channel to you the reason that I feel this is happening to us and give you some encouragement and some practical information you can start using today. Now, I'm going to be really vulnerable with y'all because, as you know, I believe vulnerability is a superpower. And I believe that it is something that's hard to do and can be scary because it gives you access to different realities that are created by you having a shift in mindset. Number one, you learn how to sustain the emotional optimism around the mindset, and you learn how to embrace your journey as it is, believing with conviction that it is changing. Once you start deciding that this is what you want to do, usually the universe will test you by allowing something to come into your life that communicates the total opposite to you about your reality. And oftentimes we start off good, but we don't finish well because what happens is you get inspired and the cycle of inspiration feels really good. You feel like you can change it. This might be one day where you actually were able to take action, move in a direction that you desire to go in. Then, after a while, something happens and it feels like reality smacked you in the face. And it feels like something is saying to you, you're stuck. Stop trying to change it. It just is what it is, and nothing you do is going to help. This is usually the test from the universe. This is the universe way of challenging us to see, are you going to allow your environment to dictate your mood, or are you going to learn how to use your mood to dictate your environment? Now, here is the vulnerable story time. Because I know in the world of social media, sometimes what you see on your feed can make it seem as if other people are living the life you want to be living, and it's not attainable for you for whatever reason. And this is not true. And this is something that is used by the simulated reality, the archons who feed off of the grief, the hatred, the self-hatred, the self-abandonment, the sadness, the anger, the rage, the jealousy, the envy, the blame, the shame, the guilt. All of these different things feed archons. They don't eat high vibrational emotions based on the map of consciousness. Okay? They eat those lower dense emotions where you're not able to shift your mood. And it seems like once you get in this cycle, if you don't put boundaries around these emotions as you experience them, you can get stuck in the cycle and end up in a sunken place. And this is the space where everything in your life starts to look bleak and you can't really see change, and seeing synchronicities may decrease. whatever you had happen with spirit guides. It may start to seem like they're not communicating with you anymore in this space. So for me, my health has been a battle for my whole life. And you would think that if someone is born with a rare blood disease that presents all of these other different issues, you will get used to it. But it's not something that I ever get used to, because I believe there is a possibility for me to improve my health despite my diagnosis. So just using that one thing as an example, I get up every day with something happening with my body that seems to be completely out of my control. And it is a choice for me at that moment to crumble, to give up, and to be bedridden, or to find a way to get up and keep going. And there's a fine line between knowing when to keep going, which can be a form of discipline, yet not knowing when to stop. So for me, inaction is a miserable place for me. So on days where I can't get as much done as I would like to, or I can't get as much done that is a daily requirement for my household and my life to run a certain way, the inability to take action is something that sometimes can lead to me feeling really miserable and helpless. And there are times where I think back on a podcast or book or video, which is saying you create your reality. The way that you think creates your reality. Your emotions creates your reality. And in these moments, sometimes remembering that inspires me, and sometimes it makes me feel worse. Now, I use the word make me feel very intentionally, and I'm going to tell you why. For those of us who came through religion, we learned and practiced, and we watched other people exhibit to us the best way to go through life. And that way to go through life is to seek with all your might something outside of you to fix whatever it is that needs to be fixed or healed or whatever it may be. And for so many of us, that led to a subconscious belief that the only way to improve your life is to chase something outside of you to fix it. Now, religion is a huge issue when it comes to this because it's a form of codependency. It's codependency with a deity who actually has a temperament that we could compare to being vengeful and sometimes loving, but other times regretting creating humanity and destroying everyone except for a select handful of people. So that is reflective of hot and cold. That's reflective of a personality that seems to be borderline, where it's hot, it's black or white, hot or cold, heaven or hell. So religion taught us duality, meaning there is no neutral. In religion, there is no in between. So if I was to offer you a solution, which is to shift into neutrality when you start to feel strong negative emotions about whatever it is in your life that you desire to change, as a solution, you may not feel like that's the solution. And this may be unconscious. So whenever you are triggered by something that seems to not be changing or getting worse, becoming neutral and detaching from that is not going to be a go-to thing that you use. And what happens is we become overly attached to what we see in the physical reality. And this blocks out the capacity to hold space for anything to change. And sometimes our belief around the situation not being able to change, our belief that it is impossible for it to change because we had tried and tried and tried and nothing has happened. All of these things put us in a relationship with reality where we're codependent. So how we feel about ourselves is based on what's happening in our reality. And if what's happening in our reality doesn't feel good to us in the moment, then sometimes we will allow our reality to dictate our vibrational frequency. And that's called living in reverse. You're not being a creator, you're being a reactor. So you're doing things backwards. We're supposed to be learning how to be thermometers where the moment is being created by us versus being a thermostat where the moment is being dictated by whatever is happening in our reality. And for some of us, it's people that we have to work with or live with, even if it's not an illness or a financial issue or a recent death in the family, like those very visceral things that we all go through at some point. But it could just be certain people in your life, and you feel like the frequency is something that's uncomfortable for you to coexist with. In that case, whether you grew up religious or not, if anyone in your bloodline practiced religion, this imprinted onto your subconscious mind. Let's say you did not grow up religious, but some of what I said resonated with you. That is something communicating to you what's hidden in your subconscious mind. And this is why it's so hard for certain things to change. Let me give you another example. Let's say that there is someone in your life who is often negative, critical, and very rarely seems to care about what you're going through. Over time, we can begin to believe that it is impossible for this person to ever be considerate of our feelings. And that actually may be something that reality has proven to you to be a logical reason for what you believe. However, I'm sure that there are things about you that have changed. And if you look back and go back in time, you would probably say to yourself, I am really surprised that this particular thing about me changed. I did not really even think it was possible for me to become who I am today. If this is the case for you, then there is a possibility, even if from 1 to 10 it's only a 1, there is a possibility that this person who is inconsiderate can become considerate of you and of your feelings. Now, if you hold a strong belief in your mind that this person will never, ever be considerate of your feelings, 9 times out of 10, they never, ever will. Not just because of the way their personality is set up, but because of the belief that has constructed inside of your mind about them. So let's say they do start changing, and it could be something that's not related to you that happened, where they're thinking to themselves, I see that I lack empathy, and I want to learn how to be considerate of other people's feelings. More than likely, if they came to you and told you that after years of seeing them be inconsiderate, you probably would not believe them. You probably would not trust what they're saying is true, and you probably would lean more towards, they must want something from me. This must be some type of mind game, some kind of manipulation. So even though something is happening in their life to shift them that you can't see, you're unable to see past what they have shown you time and time again. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, but what I am saying is sometimes it's ideal to shift into neutrality about what we believe about people as well. So this doesn't just apply to circumstances in your life, but this also applies to people. Shifting into neutrality means I'm not going to say I believe you. I'm not going to say that I don't believe you. But if there's a possibility of this changing, I am all for it. That is what I mean about neutrality. And it is in this space that you would be able to make space for a new experience. So in order for us to have a new experience, we have to make space for that new experience to happen. Are you making room for the things that you want to experience. If you are not, and you are a soul that is called to awaken, your third eye is opening, your kundalini is activating, you're learning about chakras. You have learned that everything in the universe is frequency, energy, and vibration. You know that the universe is mental, meaning most of what is happening in our world is connected to our inner world. Let's say you have learned some of those basic things that we gather as we're going through the phases of a spiritual awakening. Well, now the challenge is going to be making space for that new reality that you desire. How do you do that when everything in your life is only reinforcing what you don't like? How do you do that? How do you be real with yourself about where you are, experience where you are, and hold the possibility that things can change in your heart? How do you do that? How do you lose a loved one and the pain of it literally has just taken you out of being able to function the way you normally would? How do you have that experience but hold space for a day where you are not going to be grieving and you're going to be able to function the way you normally do or better? How do you do that? How do you believe that your body is going to heal when every day you're dealing with symptoms that's communicating something different to you? How do you hold space for the wealth that you desire to have when you're looking at all of these bills and debt constantly climbing? How do you do that? Now, one way that some of us maybe have already experienced is denial. You can go into denial about it and just be like, you know what? No, I ain't claiming that. That ain't happening. I know I learned that in Christianity. Don't claim it. It ain't happening. And I know I have watched people have illnesses that could have been managed, treated, and even healed. But because they denied its presence in their life, they ended up losing their lives over something that could have been managed. But they thought that denial was them having faith. And so here's where reality can blur the lines between denial and reality of your reality and faith that it can change. So that's not a way that we want to hold space. We want to make sure that we're using logic and reason, but also the right hemisphere of the mind, which is creativity, imagination, nurturing, being able to hold space. That something different and beautiful is going to develop from that. You can't do that with the left hemisphere of your brain, which is masculine and logical and more focused on statistics and facts. Okay? So it is a combination of using your whole brain to be able to look at situations and hold space for it to change. The second way that we can sometimes deal with this is by not dealing with it. Just completely, I'm going to act like I don't see this. I'm going to act like I don't know this is happening. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to plan any actionable steps. I'm not going to do anything to change this. I am just going to avoid it. Now, if you have an insecure love attachment that reflects avoidance, more than likely when issues show up in your life, you will also avoid those issues. If you are someone who has an aversion to conflict, more than likely you will avoid the issues. If you're someone who feels like you're already overwhelmed, you may tend to avoid what's happening in your life. So avoiding could show up as not taking steps to change it, but also it could show up as distraction and substance abuse and sleeping a whole lot, drinking a lot. And these are ways that we learn how to soothe ourselves from the 3D matrix instructions for living on Earth. Okay? Now, none of these things reflect higher consciousness. All of these things reflect lower consciousness. That doesn't mean that anyone is right or wrong for their approach to dealing with life. It simply means you are either choosing a way to deal with it that reflects love and the higher frequencies of consciousness, or you're choosing ways to deal with it that are based in fear, and those are the lower frequencies of consciousness. So what happens is each day of your life that you have experiences and your emotional response is the same is another reason that your mind will believe that it cannot change. So the goal that you can create and take baby steps to ease into would be to shift into neutrality. This means you may feel a certain negative way about what's happening. You may even feel like you cannot take any more. I'm just done. And it's okay to feel that way. But how are you responding to your own emotional needs in that moment? Because if you are not dealing with it, you're abandoning yourself, and that's going to keep your inner child in a tantrum frequency. Even if as an adult you are functioning, this is what I call a high functioning wounded child. And so you can get stuff done and you can go through your day and check off your task, but in the inside, you have abandoned yourself. And whenever we do this, we are easily irritated by things. Small things annoy us, and the amount of anger that we may feel and express is disproportionate to what's happening. An example of this could be somebody accidentally knocking over a glass of water and where you're sitting, and maybe some of it splash on you, just a little bit of water, and you get so mad and so angry where you just unleash on them and just start saying stuff and why can't you get it right? Why do you always do stuff like this? Now, they may not always knock over a glass of water, but you will find yourself using those kinds of words always. And this is that dual thinking where it's black or it's white. And it's kind of like we become more dramatic. And we are also fragile, meaning it doesn't take much to throw us off. It doesn't take much to cause us to feel disappointed. That we can even start to feel like these things happening are personal attacks on us, even though it could be an honest mistake that somebody else made. So these are all signs that your inner child is not being loved and cared for properly. So I have created something called a trigger challenge because I realized that challenges have been really successful with everyone who has participated. And it's something about knowing consciously that you are participating in a challenge that can help you to overcome some of the hard wired mindsets that are difficult to let go of. And so in this trigger challenge, the premise of the trigger challenge is to determine, first of all, you need to know what your love attachment style is. If you do not know your love attachment style, it's going to be difficult for you to self-love because you don't know how you form attachments with love. And if you don't know how you form attachments with love, how can you love yourself deep enough to heal these unconscious wounds and the patterns that they create? This is the spiritual aspect of love attachment, which I have not found anyone else really talk about. So my goal is to bring something that is revolutionary and that is untapped, because if we're just using the same information over and over again, it is going to be less likely to have transformation. So that's the first thing. The second thing with being able to respond a different way to things that trigger you is knowing what exactly triggers you and what meaning do you assign to it. If you are going throughout your life getting triggered, but not really noticing a pattern between you and the things that trigger you, it's going to be very difficult for you to become a co-creator of your reality, because you don't know your triggers, number one. You aren't clear about what these triggers mean to you. And so no matter how much you plan to do different, when you are triggered, you will fall back into the old you way of behaving. And whenever someone who is meant to ascend beyond the level of consciousness that they have operated on goes back to reacting in an old way, you are feeding the old you the food that it needs to stay alive and to control your reality, to be in the driver's seat, which means the new you is not being nourished. And because the new you is malnourished, it's going to be more difficult for you to respond in a way that is worthy of whatever it is in your life that you desire to change. So the way that you assign meaning to the triggers is what creates the emotion that follows the trigger. And if the meaning you assign to the trigger is reinforced by a strong emotional charge, now this 3D world that is going away and crashing more and more by the day becomes the reality that is being fed back to you, and that does not feel good to someone who is meant to be a cycle breaker. It's not conducive for mental health, physical health, spiritual health, and beyond, which means the vessel of your I divine higher self is going to be hovering up away from you, because our higher I divine self cannot be in our physical body if we're stuck in 3D earth lower vibrational patterns of responding, because those two things are like oil and water and they repel one another. So a lot of us are desiring our higher I divine self to be embodied within us, but our responses or reactions, shall I say, is repelling the higher I divine self away from us. And whenever your reactions repel your higher I divine self, you will feel an emptiness and you will feel a discomfort, because that's not meant to be your experience. And the purpose for feeling this way is to be a catalyst for you to find out what is it that I actually belong behaving like, so that I don't have to experience this void space in between me and my divine self. So for so many of us, what we lack is actually the ability to sustain connection with the higher I divine self, which is the evolved version of you, which is the essence of your soul. And we need connection with ourselves to be whole. And for so many of us, we have become codependent and conditioned to believe that what shows up in physical reality is a reflection of who we inherently are. And that is not true. What shows up in our physical reality is usually a reflection of what we created in the old consciousness, in the old version of us. It takes time for the new version of you to actually create ripples in your reality where you start to see outcomes that align. But a lot of us don't get a chance to experience that, because in between noticing what needs to change, taking steps to changing it, reality may start to show us something completely different, and we'll give up. We will lose heart. We will lose faith, and we will start to doubt that it's even possible. As I'm recording this, I am facing something that seems very impossible to change. And I'm recording a message channeling how to change what seems to be unchangeable, while I am observing what seems to not be changeable. This action is an example of how we actually change our reality. It requires us to not completely ignore what's happening, but to observe it without judgment. And that allows space for our reality that we desire to actually be magnetized to us versus us trying to chase it and force it to happen. The spiritual aspect of the patriarchy and the 3D matrix way of accomplishing things is force and chase. A lot of us are just now learning how to attract and to allow because we don't trust in something we have not experienced enough to believe is possible. Being able to observe without judgment and find a way to be neutral. I'm not saying that feeling joy when you're in pain is the key. That's too big of a jump. And it leads to us feeling disappointed in ourselves when we try to hold ourselves to a standard that is really not fair or possible. Okay. And for a lot of us, the ego does that. And the ego will remind you, that you are this powerful creator and you have these superhuman abilities being activated and you should be able to do this. And that can lead to us feeling worse. And so it is in those moments where we benefit from a total knockout, a total nap out. Basically, just put the ego in a little knapsack and okay, take a nap. Right now, I'm choosing to do something different because what I have been doing is not bringing me the outcomes that I desire. So I know that this is the moment to do something different, to try something new. So it is better to practice neutrality. Anything in your life that is triggering you right now is one of the greatest gifts that the universe can offer you. Because it is in those moments where portals open and we have the opportunity to actually change it. However, once you get this first step in co-creation of your reality, the next step would be to create routines to help you sustain that and to not only know what triggers you and what meaning your wounded self assigns to that particular situation, but to have your go-to practical plan that you can use at any moment in time. If you live without having a plan for how you are going to respond when you are triggered, you are living in effect of everything in your life. You're not living to be the cause of what happens in your life, which means you are in a position of being victimized. You are in a position of being preyed upon. So the goal is to know yourself well enough to know what your triggers are, to know what the meaning you assign to it, which is usually subconscious. There's a certain practice that you take yourself through to come to the realization of what has been hidden away from your conscious mind as to why those things trigger you and what you think it means. This is not something that we already know. It's usually something that requires self-reflection. This is the step that we get hung up on. So once you know those things, and once you can say, the next time this trigger happens, I'm going to use this action in response to it. You choose those different ways of responding and you repeat them over and over again with consciousness, with love, and this makes space for something new to happen. This is you holding sacred space for it to change. So with the trigger challenge, I would like for you to take 7 days. For those of you who are already working in the course, you already have access to this. So you can start this whenever you are ready to start this. But take 7 days and you're going to make a list of things that trigger you, especially paying attention to what you think it means. And you're going to pay attention to how you respond to it. What do you usually do when it happens? So if somebody says something that is hurtful and inconsiderate to you, how do you usually respond to that? Do you say something hurtful back? Do you feel hurt but don't ever express the fact that they hurt you? Or do you just blow it off as it being something that's not important, and you don't want to make it worse, so you avoid talking about it. So this is suppressing it and pushing it down, which is one of the reasons so many women have autoimmune diseases and chronic fatigue. Okay. Now, by doing this every day for the next 7 days, you're going to be able to not only understand yourself better, but you're going to see what patterns are being perpetuated by the way you respond. So the purpose in this is not to focus on what or who is triggering you. The purpose is to focus on what it means to you and how you're going to deal with it when it happens. This is you pulling away from allowing your reality to dictate your mood and how you feel about yourself. Okay? So this is simple. I have already pretty much given you the exercise, but it's great to have a framework to work with. By knowing your love attachment style, by identifying the wounds that your inner child has experienced and the subconscious pacts that were created as a result of that, and by being able to identify certain toxic patterns, common triggers, and common coping mechanisms, you will be able to create for yourself a well-aligned plan to keep you in alignment so that you can finally start shifting your reality, because now you're not all over the place. You're not confused. You have clarity, and you know exactly what it is that you are being called to do. The free ebook for everybody who joins Turn Pain into Purpose course will help you to walk through that each day for the next 7 days. If you are able to look back and see that you were able to shift the way that you respond, thus able to shift to a neutral emotion, thus start divorcing yourself from archonic energies that see you as being a reliable source of negative energy, this is going to make room for miracles to happen. And miracles can be any size. You know, it doesn't have to be this huge thing to be a miracle. It could be finally having someone acknowledge your effort and how much you care. That right there, I'm sure a lot of us would say, yeah, I'll take that miracle. I would love to be appreciated and acknowledged, and for someone to be able to see how much energy and effort I invest into being a better version of myself. Like, that's a miracle right there. So it doesn't matter the size of it. If you don't have a plan, if you don't know any of the things that we've talked about, any spirituality, manifestation, laws of hermetics, law of attraction, videos, content, books that you're consuming is only going to lead to you feeling worse, because it's not sustainable. And spirituality without practicality is spiritual bypassing at best. You're not actually tapping into the spiritual power that's being made available to you. You're actually bypassing the spiritual power that's being made available to you. And you think that you are supposed to be experiencing something different than what you are, which creates this self-fulfilling prophecy that keeps you in a cycle. And anytime we get stuck in a cycle, it zaps our confidence. And when our confidence is zapped and we only feel good in a moment, this keeps us in a simulated reality where our pain is not leading to purpose. Our pain is the pain of not changing, the pain of not growing, and the pain of not knowing how. And for those of us who are parents, it's even more rewarding to be able to be emotionally regulated, and for your children to get to see that, especially if that was something you didn't really get to see as a kid. Not only are you making space for your life to change, but you're modeling something for your children that could activate the ability for them to break cycles as well and cultivate confidence in themselves because they see you modeling by example. That is miraculous, and it is a great feeling. And this is a powerful way to feel more confident about who you are and to be able to be more authentic and aligned with who you are becoming without having to fake it, without having to beat yourself up, without having to worry. And so anything that helps us to shift out of that ultimately not only helps us, our children, and anyone connected to us, but each one of us doing this as a collective raises the frequency on the planet. So I know that you probably felt like you're supposed to be high vibrational all the time, and if you're not, it's toxic. But toxic positivity is a trap that will keep you in cycles that you are meant to break. So this is the episode that I wanted to share for this week. It took me a few days to finally record this because I wanted to make sure that my frequency was aligned with these words. And again, I was transparent about what I'm experiencing right now. And I hope that you were able to feel motivated, inspired, and energized to know, even if I cannot immediately change what's happening in my life, I can make peace with it. And I can use the pain for purpose. Ultimately, all cycle breakers are meant to be those who spiritually ascend beyond the templates that were given to us that was created by trauma and pain. So I look forward to seeing you in the private community. I will be there to welcome you. And I will also have my sister Keys there to support you. You can have one-on-ones with me. You can ask questions, share. And I think that this is one of the most beautiful things to be able to do in the world where a lot of us feel like we don't have anybody to talk to who is like-minded enough to understand, not think we're crazy, not think we're strange, not judge us. Some of us, that one thing alone will help change our reality because we feel supported. So if you're called to a spiritual awakening, I just want you to know you're not really going to be able to emotionally regulate and heal without having safe people in safe space to practice in. So I'm going to put the link in the description. Thank you for taking the time out and actually listening to this video. I would appreciate so much if you would share this video with at least one person, whether you think that they are going to receive it or not. It goes back to what I'm saying. You challenge yourself to share this with one person because this information is practical, is helpful, and if it touched you, it can touch someone else. And this is also you paying it forward for your own self. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and comment and let me know what your biggest takeaway was from this particular episode. I will be waiting to welcome you, and I just want you to know before this video ends, no matter how impossible it seems, and I will talk more about some of the things that seemed impossible that I have changed in other videos. But if you have a topic you would like for me to discuss, you can leave that comment as well, because I want to create my content based around what people actually need versus what I think people need. And I also want to thank those of you who have booked readings with me. This is me thanking you for booking a reading with me. I have not done a lot of oracle card readings as of recently, but I am still accepting readings at this time. Before the year ends and the new year begins, this is a great time to have me on board to help you plan out the new Gregorian year coming up. So I will make sure that I put the links for you to book with me in the description as well. And just a reminder, for those of you who are already in the course, I'm doing free genetic trauma readings for you that are specific to you and your bloodline. So take advantage of that. I've placed the instructions in our private community on how to take advantage of that. I look forward to being of service to you. Namaste, Namaste. One love. Ashe.